How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, this is unique. A Lifetime movie already being put into the works about Bryan Kohberger. It's too soon. He just got put into a prison. We're trying to figure out how he needs to be managed. And then you're going to put all his business out there. And yes, inmates have access to TVs. They have access to cable networks like Lifetime. And now it becomes that much harder to manage inmate Kohberger. And when I mean manage, technically his safety and security. And now when they put a special out like this, and guys, this is corrections, so we have to be wary of those in our care. Giving you a perspective most may not want to hear, but we do have to worry about his safety and security. So the question is, hey, there's a special that could be coming out about you. How do you feel about it? Maybe have mental health see you to see if you're going to be okay with this, because we can't control it. So I wanted to look into this a little bit and maybe learn in the process. How could they do this? You know, how could Lifetime just pick up and run with this? I mean, what about the families that could be affected? The victims' families? Just who gives them really this right to take this narrative and technically make it their own? And there was a great coverage on News Nation on this as well. I actually thought this coverage was good, where she even got a chance to talk to the Gonsalves family and kind of get their perspective on it. But I want to go over some points here I think you may find interesting. And just so you know, I want to show you guys a picture. This is the person that's been casted to play Kohberger. I'll give you his name shortly. What you think of him? Favors him? He's done other Lifetime movies. So everything we do is a journey together. So the news that Lifetime is producing a dramatized movie about the Idaho student murders with actor Miles Murray cast as Bryan Kohberger has stirred both curiosity and outrage. So for the public, it may feel like just another true crime movie, but for the families of the 4 students murdered in Moscow, Idaho, this decision raises raw and painful questions. How soon is too soon? How much fiction will be added? And who benefits financially when tragedy is repackaged as entertainment? So how Lifetime can legally make this film, I looked this up. So public domain facts, crimes, court cases, and trial outcomes are matters of public record. That means any producer can dramatize the broad strokes of the case, who was killed, who was arrested, the fact of conviction, sentencing, without needing permission from Kohberger or the families. And then you got the life rights and cooperation. So if filmmakers want direct access to victims, stories, photos, diaries, or exclusive interviews, they need to buy life rights. And that's from the families. This ensures accuracy and cooperation. But producers can also bypass that and fictionalize characters, relying only on public report. So look at that. If they're not paying for these rights, how much of a story are you really getting that's accurate? Let's go look at all the other Lifetime stuff that's been produced. Do they pay for the life rights, or do they just make assumptions based on the reports? And then you got books and articles. Sometimes a production company buys the rights to adapt the book or long-form article about the crime. For example, James Patterson, The Idaho 4, An American Tragedy was optioned, which opens the door to adaptation. So again, he writes the book. Let's make it into a movie. And defamation safeguards. The main legal limit is avoiding false portrayals of living individuals in ways that defame them. Changing names of secondary characters or adding disclaimers. Some characters and events are fictionalized is the common safeguards. Kind of see that at the beginning. It's like their liability. Hey, guys, we know that none of this is going to be accurate. So just in case, here's a disclaimer, and that should protect us from going ahead and putting out some false truths. So can Bryan Kohberger make money from this? That was asked of me. And certainly no. Idaho, like most states, has a Son of Sam law. And I did a video on this with a serial killer that was trying to make money from stuff he was selling. If you go on Tier Talk, is an older video, not too old, but put profit, crime, and Tier Talk, and it will pop up. It's an interesting, because I really broke down the Son of Sam law. I had to get an understanding of it, which prohibits criminals from profiting off their crimes through books, movies, or interviews. If Kohberger were to receive payment for participation, the funds would be frozen and redirected, usually to victims' families or who would sue civilly. Courts have consistently upheld that convicted murderers cannot cash in on their infamy. And so even if Lifetime wanted his cooperation, which is doubtful, Kohberger cannot legally pocket money from this project. Better question, can the victims' families make money? Possibly, but only under certain circumstances that I've found out. If they sell life rights, as I mentioned, families who agree to cooperate may receive payment for their participation, photos, diaries, or exclusive access, but this depends on whether Lifetime reached out and whether the families agreed. Through civil suits, if any profit was ever directed at Kohberger, for example, through a loophole, families could sue under Son of Sam laws to redirect money, and indirectly through funds. Occasionally, networks make donations to scholarship funds, memorial foundations, or victim support initiatives. This is less common, but sometimes used to show goodwill. However, if families decline to participate, they generally do not receive compensation, even if movie heavily features their loved ones' names and stories. That imbalance often deepens the sense of exploitation. Wow, it's good to know this. Why this hurts the family so deeply. For the victims' families, this Lifetime movie is not just another TV event. It is a painful reminder of the worst nightmare now scripted and acted out for millions to watch. So it's re-traumatization, seeing their children last hours dramatized, even inaccurately, reopens wounds. No, even inaccurately. Commercialization of grief, knowing that a network profits while their families continue to mourn, feel cruel. Guys, only 3 years ago this happened. And they just went through the trial. Well, sorry, it was a plea, but they were just going through the court process, the possibility of a trial. That just happened. So it really is too soon. Loss of control. They have little to no say in how their loved ones are portrayed and glorifying the killer, even if unintentionally dramatizing Kohberger's role risks giving him a twisted kind of notoriety. And the fan club, maybe. Let's not deny that. There are people that are addicted to these insane individuals because, I mean, there's something with them themselves. And we talked about this in another show too, why people follow or fall in love with these killers, because in some cases, maybe they think it's safe because they're locked up. We covered so many angles on this, but you wind up drawing fans or, you know, maybe people now that are going to write to him, people that may not know of the case, people that want to copycat the case. Some families refuse to participate in earlier documentaries. One Night in Idaho on Prime Video, precisely to avoid this. And the Lifetime dramatization with fictional dialogue and scenes only heighten those concerns. The broader problem with true crime is entertainment. Lifetime has long specialized in dramatized crime stories, marketed as cautionary tales. But the Idaho case raises the same hard questions we've seen in other tragedies. Should producers wait until families have more distance from their loss? Should dramatization focus on the killer's psychology or on the victim's lives and legacy? Should victim families always be compensated if the stories are told? And does rushing to production risk speeding inaccuracies and myths? We don't really even have a motive truly behind what Kohberger did. There's so much still to discover. You know, so they're going to fill in those spots of ambiguity with however they discern it based on limited facts, based on just what they assume from the reports. There's no depth. And these movies often blur the line between education and exploitation. And while they satisfy public fascination, they risk cementing a distorted version of history. And guys, most of the stuff behind the scenes, their last moments, no one knows. So they'll make up dialogue. They'll make assumptions. And it's just falsifying the last moments of someone or the last moments of a group of young adults to profit. Guys, this just happened. And look at the rush. The rush alone is disrespectful. Yes, Lifetime has every legal right to make a movie about the Idaho murders. Kohberger cannot profit from it, but the families likely won't either unless they choose to participate and sell life rights. For most, the movie will instead bring fresh waves of grief and frustration. At its core, this is about control of a narrative. Who gets to tell the story of the Idaho murders, the grieving families, or the entertainment industry? That's what makes this project so deeply upsetting, and why it's bound to remain controversial long after the credits roll. I had some other areas I wanted to cover in this. Let me see. There was something else I was looking at. Yeah, this is more of the breakdown. So what a Lifetime movie typically does. Okay, Lifetime is known. Bear with me, guys. I'm going to speed through this because I don't want to sound repetitive, but there were some other issues here that I put in that I thought you may find interesting. So Lifetime is known for making dramatized narrative movies, often 90 to 120 minutes, drawn from real incidents, sometimes marketed as based on true events or inspired by a true story. These often involve a tight structure, setup, conflict resolution, sometimes compressing timelines, scenes with characters, private dialogue, many of which are speculative or fictionalized, emotional dramatization, heightened tension, confrontation, reveal moments, and emphasis on victims, survivors, or sometimes the crime itself, often with a moral or cautionary framing. Remember, it's built to entertain, not to tell the truth. So compared to a full documentary or multi-episode series, the Lifetime format is more constrained in time and more likely to fictionalize or dramatize aspects to fit narrative arcs, keep people entertained. Given that, here are some additional risks and impacts given the specifics of this case. Viewers might take invented or dramatized scenes at face value, believing them as facts. The movie might lean into motive, speculation, or psychological profiling that is not confirmed or is controversial. It may simplify or flatten complexity, for example, interpersonal relationships, timeline, or evidence, to make the story more accessible, but that risks representation. And because it's high visibility network production, the film will likely reach audiences who are not steeped in the case details, so the film becomes a primary reference for many people's understanding. That's the scary part. Why the reaction from families, survivors, and communities can be particularly intense now, given that the movie is becoming more real or current. Here are more concrete emotional, legal, and ethical challenges. We covered some of this. Let me just revisit briefly. The sentencing is very recent, in July. Public wounds are fresh. Families are still processing grief, shock, injustice, unanswered questions. A dramatization appearing now might feel like an intrusion before they've had space to heal. And some families have opted not to participate in documentaries or interviews already, perhaps as a protective boundary. A Lifetime film may not provide such a boundary because, again, they're going to do it without their assistance. And then there's the loss of control over representation. Even if producers approach families, the script, tone, and final edit may drift away from what families would consider respectful or accurate. Once a film is produced, it's fixed. It's a fixed product. Missteps, even unintended, become enduring rather than being corrected over time. And the mythology of crime and the criminal as a character, we touched on that. There's a danger that real lives and voices of the victims get eclipsed by dramatized villain arcs, psychological deep dives into Kohlberger, or glorified protagonist versus antagonist storytelling. We see that a lot in corrections. Every time we see a movie about corrections, officers are the bad guys, inmates to the good guys. Some true crime works have been criticized for turning criminals into characters people analyze, or even worse, idolize, albeit unintentionality. We touched on that. Emotional burden and re-traumatization, scenes recreating intimate or violent moments, especially with the bodies were brutally stabbed, especially when the bodies were brutally stabbed, can be deeply triggering, especially if dramatized in graphic detail. And even fictionalized dialogue could reopen memory wounds. A parent, sibling, or friend watching a scene, even one with changed names, might see echoes of their own pain. I mean, look at the two girls that survived. You're going to let them go through it? Ethical issues around speculation, motive, and unanswered facts. Because motives is still unclear in this case, any dramatization that offers a motive may be speculative or conjectural. That opens possible inaccuracy and misleading representation. And the film may portray what could have been, what might have happened, or what he must have been thinking. An audience may take those as facts. And then there's the commercialization and profit. The fact that a network Lifetime is putting money into the signals that the story has commercial appeal. That can feel like turning tragedy into product. Families may feel that their loved ones are being used as narrative vehicles to draw viewers or add revenue. Maybe we should put a petition against this movie. Maybe if somebody wants to start that, because it's a good way to protect the family of the victims, the victims' families. Oh, yeah, family of the victims. Inequity or exposure versus harm. If there's a strong enough voice, it carries weight, and usually strong is by number. The production company and network get public publicity. The victims' families absorb emotional costs, exposure, potential media intrusion, and if families decline involvement, they may still be impacted by the public narrative without any voice in shaping it. Guys, it's all profit. So, I mean, maybe there's someone here that can start that petition. Even though many risks exist, there are responsible ways in production like this could proceed more ethically. I want to be both fair. Some things to look for or hope for is family inclusion and consultation, which probably won't happen here. If the film producers invite input, fact-checking, boundaries, example, don't depict X details, and allow families to request changes, that helps mitigate harm. The family's voice should be honored, not just as an on-screen credit, but in how the story is shaped. Guys, this is too soon. No family is going to be willing to put this story out. It's literally 3 years after the event, and they just, as I said, went through the sentencing. Clear disclaimers, transparency. The film should explicitly state where scenes are dramatized or fictional versus what is based on verifiable public record. And that's more about liability. That's BS. So I can claim that this didn't happen, but I'm still going to utilize it. If this didn't happen and you can't hold weight to it, then don't put it in there. You don't know. And you don't know how that's going to make someone react. You don't know who these young adults are. You know nothing about them. You know nothing about Kohberger. It might note some character conversations or events have been fictionalized for dramatic purposes. Tone that centers victim and impact rather than focusing primarily on Kohberger's psychology or motives. The film could emphasize the lives lost, the impact on families, grief, community, unanswered questions. Should, but no one's going to watch it. That's the sad thing, so they won't do it that way. Maybe it would be great to focus it from the victim's perspective, the grieving, but the families are probably not even involved. As you could watch in the News Nation thing, they're against this, so they're not going to be focused on that. They're just fascinated with the true crime narrative. It might minimize glorification of the crime. That's the main concern, I think. Avoiding gratuitous violence or sensationalism. The production should refrain from showing explicit gore or violent details. Just for shock effect, and it should focus on emotional truth more than sensational spectacle. Yeah. Time and sensitivity, a respectful delay before dramatization. Letting families have more time tends to reduce harm. The filmmakers might offer emotional support or counseling to family participants or those watching, and a balanced portrayal, humility about unknowns. Where motive, intent, or psychological state is unknown, the film should show ambiguity, not assert a definitive solution unless backed by evidence. Viewers should be encouraged to think critically rather than accept dramatized answers. An ethical profit share and support to victims' causes. Sometimes work provides funds or donations, scholarship, memorial funds, or specify a portion of proceeds to victim support organizations. That doesn't fix harm entirely, but acknowledges the family's stake. And the heartbreak and friction, why many will object and what their objection will likely be. Given what's known, here are the specific objections I would expect from family survivors, advocates, and community. We did not sign up for a script about my daughter that includes dialogue we never heard. We are still traumatized. We don't want a fictional version of that night that pretends to answer questions we can't even answer. We don't want him to have more public recognition or to become part of a popular culture beyond court. Because remember, the family didn't want this. Even in court, they went off and they said, you know, they pretty much said, you know, this is it. You're not who you think you are. He wanted the attention. And they shut him down. It was a great victim impact. I did a video on that if you guys want to check it out. They knew how to get to him, and I think they did very well. We fear scenes will misrepresent our loved ones' motives or the facts. This feels like profit from grief, who is benefiting. And we want to control the narrative of memory, not have a dramatized version define how the public remembers them. There's also the concern of secondary victims, surviving roommates, friends, communities who may feel exposed or misportrayed in a film. It's possible some family members might see value in telling a broader story or having a truth-telling vehicle, but that's always a fraught decision, and it should be fully voluntary. Final reflection here is the fact that Lifetime is already moving ahead makes the theoretical very real. It elevates the urgency of asking, how do we tell real tragedy responsibly? Who gets to tell it? Who is harmed by the telling? And how much does fiction interfere with truth? From a societal perspective, there's a hunger for true crime stories, for understanding evil, for justice, for closure, but that hunger puts pressure on storytellers to frame incomplete data, dramatize or fill in gaps, which can distort more than illuminate. And for the families and survivors, it can feel like losing control again, even after court decisions, media attention, documentaries, or documentaries. Now a dramatized movie adds another layer where they may have little say. Just a lot to think of here. I saw that on News Nation today, and I wanted to kind of run it by you guys. All right, guys, love your thoughts, and as always, stay safe.